Hello everyone, welcome to UX IAS. In this video, we are going to cover all the environmental conventions and protocols important from the prelims perspective for the UPSC CSC Prelims 2025. Okay, so in this session, we'll be doing a quick revision of these environmental conventions and protocols, right? But before that, let's have a small discussion about what do we mean by conventions and what do we mean by protocols. Okay, now environmental conventions and protocols. To understand the difference between these two, I'll give you an analogy from the polity section. Okay, now we know that the Constitution of India, it provides an overarching framework for the country of India, under which various policies, programs, acts, constitutional amendments, all of these can be done, right? So the conventions can be equated with the constitution, while the protocols, they will be more like the acts, the constitutional amendment acts, including the constitutional amendments. Okay, so this is the basic difference between protocols and conventions. Okay, so as I have given here, okay, so everything we'll be discussing will be given in the PPTs. Okay, so you don't have to worry about it. We'll provide you the PPTs. Okay, so environmental conventions and protocols, they are both legally binding international agreements. Okay, and conventions, they are formal agreements among the countries that set a general principle. Okay, while the protocols are those treaties that modify or add provisions to an existing convention. Okay, now for our easier understanding, for making it easier for you to remember, okay, I have classified the environmental conventions and protocols into three categories. Okay, first will be climate related conventions and protocols, biodiversity related conventions and protocols, environmental pollution or degradation related conventions and protocols. For example, what is the climate related conventions? UNFCCC. Okay, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Similarly, biodiversity related UNCBD, CITES. Okay, so these will be the various biodiversity related conventions. Okay, then what about environmental pollution related? Minamata Convention. Then we have uh, Stockholm Convention. Okay, Rotterdam Convention. All of these will come under the pollution related uh, convention and protocols. Okay, now let's start with the climate related conventions and protocols. Okay, but before we jump into the conventions, we need to know where this talk about saving our environment and all started. Okay, so in the 1960s, a book was published by writer Rachel Carlson. Okay, the book's name was Silent Spring. It talked about the uh, harmful effects of chemical fertilizers. Okay, uh, around 1940s, the chemical fertilizers, they had already been introduced and were now being used on a very large scale, and the negative impacts of these fertilizers could be seen in the 1960s. So Rachel Carson, she wrote a book about it. This book, along with a report published by the Club of Rome, the report's name was Limits to Growth okay, which was published in the 1970s. These two uh, showed, these two helped the world see that there was a very big issue with environment, okay, because of the industrialization. We all know the reasons of environmental degradation, right? uh, all the anthropogenic activities such as burning of fossil fuels, industries, chemical fertilizers, all of these were the reasons. Okay, so now the international community started to focus on this aspect. Okay, because for development we had almost destroyed our environment. Okay, so now the first environmental conference, which was the Stockholm Conference on Human Environment, was held in 1972. Okay, so the main focus of this conference was to create some kind of structure for the protection of the planet's environment and natural resources. Okay, because the conference was held in Stockholm, it was known as Stockholm Conference. Okay, so the name of the conference officially is UN Conference on Human Environment. Okay, but because it was held in Stockholm, the name has been Stockholm Conference on Human Environment. And the outcome of this conference is the Stockholm Declaration. Okay, so the Stockholm Declaration. This was the first globally subscribed document that recognized the interconnections between development, poverty, and environment. Okay, here some unique points were also there, right? For example, there was a recommendation or a point related to impact of weapons of mass destruction on the environment. Okay, so weapons of mass destruction, sorry, uh, these weapons when fired, see, these are the examples of missiles, okay, be it conventional, be it nuclear. Okay, so these weapons, when they are released or when they are used, they don't just kill human beings, right? They also destroy the biosystem or the environment around their point of impact. So such unique points were also included in the Stockholm Declaration. Okay, now uh, India was also uh, a part to this conference. Representative from India was the Prime Minister herself, that is Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. Okay, and after this conference, India enacted the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. Okay, so this started the era of environmental conservation in the world. Okay, now after this, not much was done to protect the environment. Okay, but there came another report. This report was given by the Brundtland Commission. Okay, which was formed by the UN. Okay, the United Nations General Assembly. It formed the Brundtland Commission, which gave its report. Okay, the report was officially called as Our Common Future. Okay, so this report talked about what was the issue going on and all those things, which were already being discussed in the Stockholm conference, but nothing was done because there was no there was still this fight going on between development and environment, right? So there was if people thought that either environment can be protected or economic development can be done. Both cannot go together. But this report, this changed that mindset by giving the concept of sustainable development. Okay, so I hope we all know what is sustainable development. The definition that was given by this Brundtland report stated that sustainable development is that development in which we are using the natural resources available to us, the current generation, that is us, okay, without endangering or depleting that resource for the future generation. Okay, so that is the basic definition of sustainable development. Okay, now after this, uh, the UN also set up something known as the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Okay, this was set up in the year 1988. Okay, this IPCC, we all know about it from the assessment reports, right? I hope we all know about it. Okay, so these assessment reports, they are reports published by this IPCC in which the IPCC gives few remarks, okay, of the research conducted by others. Okay, so the work of IPCC is not to conduct research of its own. It compiles all the researches from different institutions, different organizations, and after reviewing all these research and whatever reports have been given, it gives a scientific view on the climate related aspects. Okay, so its aim is to provide clear scientific views, okay, on the current state of knowledge in climate and its potential environmental and socio-economic impacts. As I said, it does not conduct its own research, nor does it monitor climate related data or parameters. It simply uses the reports and research of others to give some kind of scientific opinion. Okay, and see, from the name itself, you can guess that it is a governmental, like intergovernmental means the government of almost all countries are associated with this. Now, this IPCC, it published its first report in 1991, which formed the basis of the very, very important Rio Earth Summit. Okay, keep in mind, we have not gone into conventions as of yet. We are just seeing the background. Okay, so it led to the Rio Earth Summit. Okay, now this the official name of this Rio Earth Summit was the UN Conference on Environment and Development. Okay, this conference, it took place in 1992 in Rio de Janeiro of Brazil. Okay, so this Rio Earth Summit or Rio Summit or Earth Summit or UNCED, whichever you might want to call it. Okay, this was the the biggest conference so far. Okay, and one of the most successful conference so far in the field of environment. Okay, this conference, it actually resulted in six important things. Okay, why did I say six important things? Because these six are different. Three documents and three conventions. These were the result of this conference. Okay. So, what were those documents or those conventions? So, the documents that we got from this Rio Earth Summit were the Rio Declaration, the Agenda 21, Forest Principles. Then the three conventions that we got were the UNFCCC, UNCCD, and UNCBD. So this is UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. Okay, this is UN Convention on Combating Desertification. Then this is UN Convention on Biological Diversity. Okay. So these three are the most important conventions. Okay. And these three documents were also there. We'll see what are these documents. These two basically dealt with sustainable development, and this was related to forest. Okay, afforestation, preventing deforestation, all of those were associated with this. And as from the names of the conventions, you might guess this is related to climate change. This is related to desertification, which we can consider as an aspect of climate change. And this is related to biodiversity. Okay, so let's see one by one about each of these. So let's quickly go through the three documents first. Okay, then we'll go into the details of the conventions. Okay, so this Rio Declaration, as I said, this was related to sustainable development. It gave some guiding principles, to be exact, 27 guiding principles for the protection of environment and achieving sustainable development. Okay, then we had the Agenda 21. As the name suggests, the 21 doesn't mean that there are 21 agendas. Okay, 21 here signifies the 21st century. Okay, so these are the agendas for 21st century were included in this document. Okay, this is considered as the second most significant result of the Rio Summit. Okay, which gave a blueprint for the sustainable growth. Okay, and the UN Commission for Sustainable Development, this is tasked with the execution of the Agenda 21. Okay, now the final document that we had was the Forest Principles. Okay, this is also known as the Rio Forest Principles. Okay, because obviously Rio Earth Summit. Okay, and this is a non-binding legal framework that is related to forest development and forest conservation. Okay, then let's go into the first convention that we are going to study, which is related to climate change. Okay, and that is the UNCCD. Okay, which is the Convention to Combat Desertification. This convention was conceptualized in 1992 in the Rio Earth Summit, but it was adopted in 1994. Okay, see, just because we conceptualize something doesn't mean that it is created. There are lots of fine tuning, there are lots of rules, regulations, all of these aspects that need to be uh, dealt with. So it took 2 years to create this UNCCD. Now, this UNCCD is the only legally binding international document or agreement or treaty which links development and environment to land management. Okay, so how the condition of land, efficient use of the land, sustainable use of the land is related to environment and development. This is the only convention that deals with this aspect. Okay, this convention became the driving force behind the SDG, that is Sustainable Development Goal number 15, which deals with land restoration, land degradation, and all those things, and the land degradation neutrality concept. Now, what is this land degradation neutrality? So, let's take, for example, that in India, 100 hectares of land is getting degraded every year. Okay, it is turning into a desert, it is turning into a bad land, whatever the case might be, or simply just the soil fertility is being reduced. So if this is the amount of land that is being degraded, the similar area of land should be reclaimed. Okay, so that the net loss of land or the net gain of land should be zero. Okay, the gain can be more, but it should not be less than zero. So that is the concept of land degradation neutrality. So these were the things that the UNCCD gave. Okay, there is one homework for you. I will give you. You go after this class, go to Google, or if you have this in your notebook, that is environment notes, then read about this, the Delhi Declaration, okay, related to UNCCD. Now, let's go to the next convention. The next is the most important outcome of the Rio Earth Summit, that is the UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. This, as we saw, was conceptualized and adopted in 1992, but came into force 2 years later in 1994. Okay, there are a total of 198 members. Okay, except, but the unique thing here is USA never ratified this convention. It signed the convention, but the Parliament of USA, it never ratified it. Okay. While Canada, it had ratified this convention, but after the end of the Kyoto Protocols, it withdrew. Okay, in 2012. Okay. Now, this Convention on Climate Change, Framework Convention on Climate Change, this aims to stabilize the greenhouse gas emissions and prevent interference with the climate system. So basically, it's saying that we need to control greenhouse gas emission so that we can control climate change. Okay. Now, the Secretariat of UNFCCC is currently at Bonn, Germany, but earlier during the starting years, it was actually in Geneva. Okay, not important. Just current secretariat we need to remember. Okay. Now, the Article 2 of this convention, it gives the objective of the convention. Okay, that is to achieve stabilization of greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere at a level that would prevent dangerous anthropogenic interference with the climate change. Now, we all know that climate change is a natural process, but it got aggravated due to us, due to anthropogenic activities. So this convention, it aims to reduce the impact of the anthropogenic activities on climate change so that climate change is not accelerated, rather it proceeds as per its natural pace. Okay, then there is something called as the conference of parties. Okay, this conference of parties is actually the decision making body of the UNFCCC. Okay, here all the leaders of the member parties, they come together, they have a discussion, they come out with some declarations, some statements, some targets. Okay, this the conference of party of UNFCCC is conducted once every year. That is, it is conducted annually. Okay, it is conducted annually. The most recent was held in Baku, Azerbaijan. That was the Conference of Party 29. Okay, since 94, Conference of Party 29 was held in 2024. The next, that is the COP30, will be held in Belém in Brazil in November 2025. In 2024 also, November 2024, the UNFCCC Conference of Party was held. Okay. Now, if not every convention, but most of the conventions, they have something called as a protocol. One, two, three, there can be many protocols. Okay, or there can be none. Okay, so the first protocol under this UNFCCC, what did we see about protocols in the start of the class? These add some provisions, these modify something in the conventions. Okay, so in the third conference of party of the UNFCCC, which was held in Kyoto, Japan, okay, in the year 1997, the Kyoto Protocol was the outcome. Okay, however, it took 8 years to come into force. That is, it came into force in 2005. Okay, now again, what was the this Kyoto Protocol? See, UNFCCC, it did not give any specific targets, did not identify any specific greenhouse gases that we needed to target. Okay, so to bring out specific targets so that we can act in that direction to bring out identify certain greenhouse gases which we need to act upon, this Kyoto Protocol was enacted or yes, enacted. This Kyoto Protocol aimed to cut emissions of greenhouse gases across the developed world. Okay, not across the world, the developed world, by about 5% by the year 2012. 5% of which level? Of the 1990 levels. Okay, of which the data was available. This Kyoto Protocol, it went, the target was set till 2012. Okay, so after 2012, we had the Doha Amendment or the Doha Conference of Party in 2012, in which new targets were given for another 8 years. But many parties, they did not comply with it. We saw that Canada left. So in this year only, Canada left in 2012, which led to the failure of the Doha amendments. Okay, so let's go into a bit more detail of Kyoto Protocol. Okay, so this Kyoto Protocol, like I said, it identified, it gave some targets. The target was 5% reduction of the 1990s level by the year 2012. It also identified what were the greenhouse gases that needed to be targeted. Okay, so there were total of six greenhouse gases, which were CO2, methane, nitrous oxide, sulfur hexafluoride, hydrofluorocarbon, that is HFCs, and perfluorocarbon, that is PFCs. Okay, so these were the targeted greenhouse gases under the Kyoto Protocol. Okay, then another outcome of the Kyoto Protocol. See, Kyoto Protocol is a very important protocol because there were multiple outcomes. The targets, the greenhouse gases, CBDR, all of these were the result of Kyoto Protocol. Under CBDR, there were various countries, Annex 1 countries, Annex 2 countries, Annex 3 countries. Okay, so lots of then there were trading mechanisms. Okay, so all of these were the outcomes of Kyoto Protocol. So we'll go into detail about this. Okay. Now let's go into the concept of CBDR. Okay. The CBDR is common but differentiated responsibility. What do you mean by this term? So here we basically mean that from the word common, we know that if environment is degrading or environment is facing pollution and all, it is not just for India or it is not just for USA or just China, right? Anyone is whoever is polluting, everyone is being affected, right? So the responsibility is common, but it also is differentiated. Why? because developed countries, they are the historical polluters. Because of them, the situation has arrived at this point. Developing countries, they are developing in the recent decade, right? So they are not the reason for the pollution. The developed countries are. Hence, both will work, but the developed countries will have bigger responsibilities compared to the developing or the least developed countries. Okay, so that is what is given here. Okay, then let's go to see what is the um, different division of countries under this CBDR. Okay, now the Kyoto Protocol divided the member countries into three categories. Okay, so the first one will be Annex 1, then Annex 2, then there is non-annex countries. Okay, so the Annex 1 countries included the developed countries, which were US, UK, Russia, and multiple economies in transition. Okay, so basically these were the Eastern European nations like Ukraine, Turkey, Yugoslavia, and all those countries. Okay, so these countries, they must work for preventing the rise of greenhouse gases and all those targets set under the Kyoto Protocol. That is the 5% reduction. Okay, then there is the Annex 2 countries. Okay, so these are also developed countries, but these countries, they have recently developed. Okay, so they are required to provide financial and technical support to the economies in transition, that is these countries, and developing countries to assist them in reducing their greenhouse gas emission. Okay, and finally, the non-annex countries, which include the low-income developing countries, which have no binding targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, because these are developing right now, so we can say that they have not uh, polluted the environment as much, so they are not given any binding directions. Okay, then after this, like I said, there are some market mechanisms. Okay, in total, there are three market mechanisms under the Kyoto Protocol, which include the clean development mechanism, the emission trading, and the joint implementation. Okay, now these are like, see, we know that carbon trading. So these are those concepts. Okay, so let's see what are these. First, let's see what is joint implementation. So here, two developing nations are there. Okay, they will collaborate and implement friendly initiatives or create friendly technologies together. Okay, while the clean development mechanism, here one will be developed country, one will be developing country. Okay, the developed country will provide financial help to the developing country, or it will give some technology to the developing country at minimal cost, so that, see, what are the reason for doing this. Then finally I'll tell the emission trading first, and then we'll see why these mechanisms were created. The emission trading here, basically, you will emit, you have been given, see, targets were set, right? So country A was given some target, let's say it can emit 10 units of carbon dioxide. Country B was given the target of emitting 20 units, while country A crossed the target and it ended up emitting 13 units, while country B, it emitted only 17 units. Here, country B will say that I have 3 units left to emit, but I don't need those units, so I'll sell those units to you so that you will have 10 plus 3, that is 13 units. Hence, you will not be penalized. Okay. And for selling you these 3 credits, I will get some money from you. So that is the emission trading. Okay. This can be done between any country. It can be a developed country, between two developed countries, developed or developing, or between two developing countries. Okay. Now, similarly, in the joint implementation and clean development mechanism, same, the units or the money are traded, specifically certified emission reduction, okay, or emission reduction units. These are traded. So, country A, which is giving money to another developed nation, country B, which failed to achieve its target, they will come together and they will money will be exchanged. Okay. Similarly, for the clean development mechanism, it will be between developed and developing. Okay. Now, the Kyoto Protocol, it ended in 2012. We talked about it, right? So after that, some targets were needed to be set, but there were lots of problems. We saw Canada left, and after that, few conference of parties, they were not very successful. Okay. Then came the landmark Paris Conference of Party, which resulted in the Paris Agreement. Okay, this Paris Conference of Party was held in 2015, and it was the 21st COP of UNFCCC. Okay, now uh, what were the provisions of the Paris Agreement? Okay, the first provision was that to combat climate change and limit the global temperature under 2 degrees of above the pre-industrial levels, with the target of 1.5 if it is possible. See, if we can achieve 2 degrees, it is good, but limit it within 2 degrees, then it is good. But if we can limit it under 1.5 degrees, then it's even better. Okay. So that was the aim of the Paris Agreement. Like I said, it replaced the Kyoto Protocol. Okay. And under this Paris Agreement, something new was created. That was the nationally determined contributions. Okay. So what do we mean by this nationally determined contributions? For example, I will tell you that you need to finish your environment section for the prelims in one day. Some of you will say, okay, one day I'll finish it in half a day. Some will say, sir, one day is very difficult. I need at least 5 days. And those who said they will need 5 days, they will obviously fail, right? They will not be able to achieve the target. Then I'll penalize them, and they will say that you are not doing the right thing. You should not penalize us because we already told you we don't have the capacity to complete the environment revision in one day. So to avoid that situation, I'll ask you guys how much time you need. I'll ask person A, he'll say I'll need one day. Person B will say I'll need half a day. Person C will say I'll need 3 days. Okay. Then after your own determined time period that you need, say that you require, I will go to you, I'll ask you, have you achieved your target? If you have not achieved your target, I'll penalize you. And here you cannot say that it was my fault, because you yourself determined the target and determined the time frame. Okay. So this NDC was introduced for that purpose itself. Okay. Now, this was all about the environment related or the climate related conventions. Now we'll go into the biodiversity conservation related conventions. The first one will be the Bonn Convention, which was adopted in 1979 but came into force 4 years later in 1983. This convention, it deals with migratory species, the conservation of migratory species, and is officially known as Convention on the Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals. In short, it is known as the CMS Convention. Okay. This is a treaty under the UNEP. This you need to remember. This is an important point. There can be a statement. Okay. So this treaty is under the UNEP. Okay. Like I said, it was introduced in 1979 and came into force in 1983. There are 133 parties from Africa, Central and South America, Asia, Europe, and Oceania. Okay. But okay, India is its member since 1983, that is since its inception. Okay, this convention, it has both legally binding and non-legally binding aspects to it. So legally binding agreements, like the name suggests, if you are not able to achieve your targets, you will be held accountable. While non-legally binding memorandum of understandings, these are usually between countries where they will be like, okay, we'll do this and this, but there will be no punishment or anything like that. It will be voluntary. Okay. One important aspect of this convention is that, see, when we say migratory species, most of us directly think about birds only. Okay, Amur, falcon, then flamingos, lots of migratory birds we think about. But there are many marine animals as well as terrestrial animals who undertake migration. Okay, so this convention includes all the three categories, that is terrestrial, marine, and avian migratory species. Okay, now the species covered under this convention, they are divided into two categories, that is the appendix 1, where threatened migratory species are listed, which means that these species, they need a lot of conservation, they are threatened with extinction. While appendix 2, it lists the migratory species which are not threatened uh, in extinction, but they will be if nothing is done. Okay, so depending on their urgency, they have been divided into two categories. Okay, then the next convention is the UNCBD. Okay, this is the outcome of UNFCCC, right? Now, the main vision of this convention is to live in harmony with the nature by 2050. Okay, that is the vision of this convention. And we have discussed, it was adopted at the Rio Earth Summit in 1992. The secretariat as is at Montreal. It operates under the UNEP just like the Bonn Convention. Okay, and then 196 member countries are party to this, but USA is not. Okay, so keep these points in mind. US is not a party to this. US is not a party to what else? Kyoto Protocol. Okay, which other country is not a party to Kyoto Protocol? Write it in the comment section. Okay, then the objectives of this convention are conservation of biological diversity, sustainable use of its components. Okay, it's not saying that you don't need to use it, you need to use it sustainably. Okay, and fair and equitable sharing of the benefits of biological diversity. Now, the first objective, conservation of biological diversity, very simple. Same goes for the second objective, right? Sustainable use of its components. The third one, you might be confused. So, let's say, for example, in your village, this flower is growing. Okay, let's name this the Humba Humba flower. Okay, now this flower has medicinal properties. Okay, it will be very beneficial if it is used in the painkillers. It is a very potent painkiller, the raw material for a very potent painkiller. Okay, some pharmaceutical company comes, so your tribe, your community knows about it, but you are not commercializing it. You are just using for it your own use. Okay, but then comes company ABC. Okay, and files a patent on the use of this flower. As a result, the local community, your community, is not able to access it. So this is predatory, right? This is wrong. So the UNCBD, it aims to prevent such kind of incidents. It There is a protocol under this, which we'll see next, which uh, aims to achieve this fair and equitable sharing of benefits. Okay. Now, after the UNCBD, India enacted a law which implements the provisions of this UNCBD. The act is the Biological Diversity Act of 2002, and the objectives of this act are exactly these three objectives. Okay, exactly same. Okay, then let's see the different conference of parties and protocols. Okay, so the conference of party again is the governing body, but unlike UNFCCC, which meets every year, this meets once every 2 years. Okay, and the most recent one was in 2024, which was the 16th conference of party held in Cali, Colombia. Okay, now there are two protocols under this UNCBD. The first one is Cartagena Protocol on biosafety, and the other is the Nagoya Protocol, which is related to benefit sharing. Okay, the fair and equitable sharing of benefits. The Cartagena Protocol was adopted in the year 2000, and came into force in 2003. See, this protocol was not adopted in any regular COP. Okay, there was an extraordinary COP held for enacting the protocol. Okay, what is the aim of this Cartagena Protocol? See, from the name itself, you can guess what will be the aim of this. So we know that there are lots of genetically modified organisms, right? So they might have negative impact on your local biodiversity, right? So this seeks to protect biodiversity from these living modified organisms by ensuring their safe handling, safe transport, and safe use. Okay. What about the Nagoya Protocol? Like I said, it deals with equitable benefit sharing or access and benefit sharing. Okay, this was adopted in 2010. This deals with commercial commercial utilization of biological and genetic resources. Okay, the same example I gave will be applicable here. Okay, then there are some 20 targets set under the Aichi biodiversity targets of the UNCBD for the period of 10 years of 2011 to 20, but it was not very successful. Okay. So if you get a question asking IC biodiversity targets are associated with which convention? It will be UNCBD. Okay. Now let's go to the next. That is CITES. Okay. So CITES, it is a very simple convention. Okay. The Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. Okay. So here the focus is trade. Okay. Of wild fauna and flora. Here the trade is not completely banned, it is regulated. Okay, the convention doesn't ban the trade of endangered species, but it regulates it. Okay, so it seeks to balance conservation needs with those of sustainable economic development. This was conceptualized in the 1963 meeting of IUCN. Okay, IUCN, and was formally adopted in 1973, came into force 2 years later in 1975. Okay, this convention is legally binding on the member parties, but it does not replace the national laws. Okay, then under this CITES there are three appendices. Okay, depending on the uh, threat level of the species. Okay, there are three different categories of species. One is species that are in danger of extinction, species that are not facing immediate extinction but need to be conserved. Okay, then protected species in at least one country. So these are not having any kind of danger in most countries, but in few countries there are some danger to these animals. Okay, so these are the three appendices. Examples: in appendix 1 we have Asiatic lions. Okay, then we have tigers. In appendix 2 we have alligators, and in appendix 3 honey badger. Okay, this is a rodent animal of the American continent. Okay, then these were all related to biodiversity. Now we'll go into the environmental degradation related conventions. Okay, the first one being the Ramsar Convention. Okay, so the Ramsar Convention is officially known as the Convention on Wetlands. Okay, but because it was held in the city of Ramsar of Iran, it is known as the Ramsar Convention. Okay, so it is an intergovernmental treaty that provides the framework for the national action and international cooperation to conserve and wisely use wetlands and their resources. So it is about wetlands. Okay. Then it was adopted on 2nd February 1971. Hence, this day, that is 2nd February, is celebrated as the observed as the World Wetlands Day. Okay, like I said, it was the convention was adopted in the city of Ramsar of Iran, hence the name Ramsar. Okay, and it came into force in 1975. Okay, the headquarter is in Gland, Switzerland. Okay, then uh, what are the criteria for various sites to become um, Ramsar sites? Okay, those sites which are included under this convention, those are called as Ramsar sites. Okay, um, and what are the criteria? Okay, so it should be unique. It should have endangered species. It should have big, like large biodiversity. Okay, lots of species are there, or there are few species but they are endangered or they are critically endangered. Okay, then waterfowl populations, that is waterfowl means birds. Okay, which are associated with wetlands. So the next criteria is species support, that is the number of species that depend on this wetland. Okay, and fish and aquatic life. Okay, So these are the few criteria for identifying any site as a Ramsar site. Okay. So these are few facts that I have given. There is nothing to discuss here. Okay. The world's first site, world's largest sites, the most number of sites in which country, uh, maximum area of wetlands in which country, and the most recent additions to the Ramsar sites list of India. Okay, there are total of 89 sites as of now. If you are able to remember all those 89 sites, great. If not, just remember these four and the last 10 you remember. Okay, in which state this site is there, what are the important species that are found there. Okay, so these things you'll need to remember. Then there is one record of some very important Ramsar sites which are facing threats. Okay, due to any reason, developmental activities, pollution, or any other human related reasons. If a site, a Ramsar site, is facing danger or there is a change in its ecological character, then it is included in something known as the Montreux's record. Okay. Currently, there are two sites of India which are included in it. One is the Keoladeo National Park, and the other is the Loktak Lake. And there was one more wetland which was included in this Montreux record, which is the Chilika Lake of Odisha, but now it is not there. Okay, because there were lots of efforts to prevent the degradation of the Chilika Lake, and when the threat was eliminated, it was removed from the list. Okay, next. The next is the Vienna Convention. Okay, this convention deals with protection of ozone layer. Okay, and it is considered one of the most successful conventions in the world. Okay, so this was adopted in 1985, came into effect in 1988, and this convention is the only convention to achieve universal ratification. That is, every country in the world have ratified this convention. Okay, and this happened in 2009. Not required to remember that it achieved universal ratification in 2009. Just remember that it is the first convention to achieve universal ratification. Okay, then so what is the aim of this convention? Protection of ozone layer. Protection from what? So there were lots of chemicals or gases which are known as ozone depleting substances. Okay, in short, ODS. Okay, now these ODS, ozone depleting substances, they react with the ozone present in the atmosphere. Okay, in the stratosphere, and they break it down to form O2 and some other chemical. Okay, for example, chlorofluorocarbon. This breaks down the O3 into O2 and O plus ion, which then combines with the chlorine and forms another chemical. Okay, this convention aims to control or eliminate the production, manufacturing and production are same, manufacturing and use of such chemicals. Okay, so this convention also has a conference of party, but once every 3 years. The most recent one was the 13th conference of party held in Bangkok, Thailand. in the year 2024, and before that in 2020 held in Tashkent. Okay. Then the Montreal Protocol is a protocol to the Vienna Convention. Okay. And this protocol, see, the convention, like we have already discussed multiple times, the convention doesn't give some targets or doesn't have any binding force. So a protocol is enacted which gives targets, gives some kind of accountability, it becomes legally binding and all those things. So the Montreal Protocol, just like the convention, is the first protocol to have universal ratification. Okay. This protocol identified nearly 100 man-made ozone depleting substances. For example, CFCs, HCFCs, sulfur hexafluoride, okay, all of these things, which need to be eliminated. Okay, so this agreement was ratified in 1989. Um, the first UN protocol to have been adopted by every nation in the globe. So, universal ratification of adoption. Okay. The target of this Montreal Protocol was to phase down the consumption and production of different ODS in a stepwise manner with different timetables for developing and developed nations. Okay. So, there was, see, if we are the use of CFCs and all the ODSs, it was actually being done for ACs, refrigerators, all those things. Okay. So if we are eliminating those, some alternative is also needed, right? And as an alternative, hydrofluorocarbons was introduced. However, it was later found that it is a very, very potent greenhouse gas. So even though we are protecting the ozone layer, we are contributing a lot to global warming through this hydrofluorocarbons. Okay. Hence, these hydrofluorocarbons, they were also included under this Vienna Convention, specifically the Montreal Protocol through the Kigali Amendment. Okay. Under which the member parties, are expected to decrease the manufacture and use of HFCs by about 80 to 85% by 2045. Okay, so this was the Kigali Amendment. Then the next convention is the Basel Convention, which is related to the movement of hazardous waste and disposal. That specifically the transboundary movement of hazardous waste and their disposal. Okay, here there is a concept related to which is known as the prior consent approval. So this convention doesn't ban the movement of transboundary movement of hazardous waste and their disposal. Rather, it says that it should be reduced, and if it is being done, it should be done with the knowledge, with the consent of the destination country. Okay, usually what happens, the developed countries, they transport their hazardous waste and all to the developing nations where there is a less amount of strictness relating to these waste management. Okay, hence this convention was adopted in the year 1989 and was done in Basel of Switzerland, hence known as the Basel Convention, and came into force in 1992. Okay, then the next convention that we are going to discuss is the Rotterdam Convention. This also deals with prior informed consent. However, here it is not the movement of hazardous waste. Okay, here it's not waste, it is hazardous chemicals. Okay, and here a trade is being done with respect to the hazardous chemicals. Okay, so the convention, it says that the seller country must tell the buyer country about all the negative impacts and everything that is to be needed, that is to be known about this hazardous chemical, so that the buyer country can make a proper decision with uh, enough amount of information and all. Hence, this prior informed consent. Okay, and it is legally binding. Okay, then we have the Stockholm Convention on persistent organic pollutants. Okay, for example, DDT. Okay, now this was adopted in the year 2001, came into force in 2004. Eliminate. So, what is the aim of this? To eliminate or reduce the release of POPs into the environment. Okay, and under this convention, the persistent organic pollutants are divided into three annexes depending on their like potential to harm the environment. Okay, so there are around 12 POPs which need to be eliminated, while there are some which the use of which is needed to be restricted, and some POPs which people think that they are not producing, but they are actually produced and released unintentionally as a byproduct. Okay, so this is the Stockholm Convention, and then we have the Minamata Convention on Mercury. Okay, so yeah, so the Global Environment Facility. Okay, this is the interim financial mechanism for this convention. Your homework is find out which other conventions are financed by the Global Environment Facility. Okay, and UNIDO is playing an active role in supporting the developing countries to help them transition to implement the convention. Okay, now the last convention that we are going to discuss is the Minamata Convention on Mercury. Okay, so this is to protect the human health and the environment from the adverse effects of mercury. It was adopted in 2013, came into force in 2017, covers all aspects of the life cycle of mercury, and it is a legally binding document which has been ratified by India. Okay, so this was these were all the important conventions that you need to know about for the upcoming prelims. And I hope you will all be doing great. All the best.